Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for April 16th of 2024. For today, we have an enhanced risk for Iowa into portions of western Illinois and northern Missouri there, with a slight risk that extends down into northern Arkansas there. Risks for today do include a 10% tornado risk, including the potential for a strong tornado or two. This is going to be a conditional risk. We could see the potential for a couple of tornadoes, some of which again could be strong, but the risk for strong tornadoes is definitely going to be conditional. Our damaging wind risk does include a 15% wind risk, where we could see the potential of some scattered damaging wind gusts, as well as a 30% hail risk, where we could see the potential for some massive hailstones. And then for tomorrow, we do have a slight risk for southern Michigan into eastern Indiana and Ohio there, with a marginal threat that extends across Kentucky, West Virginia, Western Virginia, Western North Carolina, Northern Georgia, Northern Alabama, Northern Mississippi, and Tennessee. Threats for tomorrow do include a 5% tornado risk for the slight risk region, a 15% damaging wind risk for the slight risk region, where we could see the potential for some scattered damaging wind gusts, as well as a 15% hail risk, where we could see the potential for some scattered large hail. And then for day 3 outlook, we do have a probabilistic 15%. For day 4 to day 8 outlook, we currently don't have anything issued. I'm going to skip over our WBC outlooks as well as our winter weather outlooks. I'm also going to skip over timing here upcoming, because this is an ongoing risk, and I am wanting to get this forecast out as soon as possible, because again, this is an ongoing risk. So taking a look at our 500 millibars as well as our surface observations, we actually don't have our surface observations anymore because they broke for some reason. But taking a look at our surface observations first, we currently have a surface low that is located somewhere around the Iowa region, northwestern Iowa, and we currently have a dry line attached to a cold front that is currently making its way eastward and is triggering our storms. We also do have another line of storms that is currently ahead of the main convective line that is currently forming and already has multiple ongoing tornadoes. We also had a couple of storms attached to the warm front that is on the northern end of that low pressure system, and we do have a couple tornado warnings for those storms there as well. So again, this is an ongoing risk, but as far as our 500 millibars go, we do have a pretty strong 500 millibar jet here with mid-level flow that could potentially get upwards of 100 miles per hour. It is going to slowly strengthen over the next couple of hours, but as of right now, it is definitely pretty strong and definitely going to support the risk for severe thunderstorms and definitely going to provide a lot of speed shear for our hail risk. Taking a look at our 850 millibar jet and how that's going to support our tornado risk and our directional shear across this region, we are expected to see a pretty strong low-level jet currently moving into this region with 850 millibar flow that could potentially get upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour, which is definitely really strong and will definitely provide this region with some pretty strong speed shear, and that will definitely be supportive of the potential for tornadoes. Taking a look at our 200 millibars for our speed shear as well as our directional speed shear and how that's going to support our hail risk, as well as our spreading of our wind vectors and how that's going to aid in our overall severe thunderstorm risk. We currently have a lot of spreading of our wind vectors here, so we definitely have a lot of defluence aloft, and that's definitely going to support some very widespread lift across this region, and that will definitely help drastically with our risk for severe thunderstorms. As far as our speed shear goes, we aren't really going to see too terribly strong 200 millibar flow. We could potentially see 200 millibar flow that could potentially get upwards of 50 to potentially 70 miles or 70 knots. That is definitely a little bit more on the lower end for our 200 millibars, but will potentially help overall with our speed shear, but overall I don't really see too much aid coming from our directional or our 200 millibars, so we are probably going to see a little bit more limited speed shear across this region. Taking a look at our directional shear and how that's going to support our tornado risk across this region, we currently have a lot of directional shear across this region with storm relativity values upwards of 400 to potentially 500 and 300 meters squared a second squared of storm relativity. That's definitely going to be very supportive of a tornado risk and definitely going to be able to support the potential for strong tornadoes across this region as well. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to support the risk for hail across this region, even amongst our lower end speed shear at 200 millibars, we definitely have a really strong 500 millibar jet, which will still provide us with a pretty large amount of speed shear across this region with bulk shear values that could potentially get upwards of 60 to 50 knots, around the mid 60s as possible, and that will definitely be very supportive of the potential for hail and potentially some gorilla hail with storms across this region. Taking a look at composite reflectivity as well as some general radar analysis, we are not going to be going over timing again, as I previously mentioned. We are very short on time because this is an ongoing risk, and I want to get this video out as soon as possible. But I will throw in our satellite for some satellite analysis, because it is definitely going to play a role in our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. As of right now, we currently have our main convective line that is forming. And that is behind a lot of rain showers that are currently ongoing ahead of that. And we thought that this was probably going to lead to overall more of a lower end risk for tornadoes. And that's kind of why this risk was more conditional than really set in stone. But we already have storms forming, and again, we have multiple tornado warnings currently ongoing for this line. So not only will this line support the potential for some tornadoes, some of which could potentially be strong, but also the potential of some damaging wind gusts and some massive hailstones. Let's move over to our satellite here for a moment. We are seeing some more isolated storms, or not really isolated storms. It is more of a convective line. It's not really, it is more of a linear system. It's not really a bunch of discrete cells. So that is probably going to favor overall more of a damaging wind risk, but we could still see the potential for tornadoes develop up along it. If I can find our satellite here, let's start off with our natural color. If we run it back a couple frames, just so we can see what was going on before storms actually fired. If you were to take all of this out and replace it with just blue open skies, this would definitely be very concerning for our risk for tornadoes. Even though we have some rain showers that are currently ongoing, we were supposed to get a clearing between our storms and those rain showers, and that's going to help the environment redevelop, redestabilize, and overall is going to allow for an insane amount of fuel to build up in the warm sector, and that's going to support our risk for tornadoes and robust storms across this region. If we didn't have that, dry, or that area of clearing there behind our rain showers, then we likely wouldn't see a risk as big as we thought it was going to be. But because we have that clearing, that is definitely going to help a massive amount in getting that atmosphere ready for storm development. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability across this region, we are not really going to have any sort of issues with overmixing like we did yesterday, because of that short window that we were going to have. That did lead to some uncertainty in how much that atmosphere is actually going to be able to recover and support the risk for severe thunderstorms. However, those previous rain showers ahead of our storms are going to prevent any sort of overmixing. It will likely cool down the atmosphere at least a little bit, and maybe we'll look at those at our temperatures. But as far as our dew points, we definitely have some pretty decent dew points across this region, with dew points upwards of the mid 60s, which will definitely provide us with some pretty decent instability across this region. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to impact our storms across this region as far as instability, we are expected to see quite a lot of heat across this region. Again, the atmosphere was cooled down a little bit due to those rain showers that are currently ahead of storms. However, that clearing across this region is allowing for heat to build again between our storms and those rain showers, and that's leading to some overall better instability and more surface instability that will actually allow for these storms to be surface based. If we didn't have that clearing, we would probably see more elevated storms, but we are seeing temperatures upwards of the low 70s to potentially the low 80s across this region. They are going to be a little bit further down to the south that aren't really going to be too affected by those rain showers. But with our fairly decent dew points, we could definitely see some pretty decent instability across this region. Taking a look at our most unstable cape and how that's going to fuel the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, we currently have some pretty decent instability with cape values upwards of the low 2000s to the upper 1000s, and that's definitely going to be sufficient enough to fuel the risk for tornadoes across this region and the possibility for significant tornadoes. Again, we do have some pretty decent directional shear across this region, and couple that together with our instability, that's definitely going to make for a recipe for potentially strong tornadoes. Taking a look at our surface-based cape, I don't really have a lot to say about this outside the fact that our clearing is definitely allowing for more surface instability than we previously would have thought if we didn't have that clearing, or previously would have forecasted. So that clearing is definitely helping a lot with the overall risk for severe thunderstorms, and we see the majority of our most unstable cape translate down to our surface-based cape, and that is going to allow for surface-based storms, the potential for tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to aid in fueling the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, we have a lot of 0 to 3 kilometer instability across this region, with cape values at 0 to 3 kilometers that could potentially get upwards of the mid 100s and the low 100s, which is definitely going to be pretty sufficient in aiding in the overall risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, and we should definitely see a very large amount of aid come out of this. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that's going to indicate the potential for tornadoes across this region, we have some pretty decent energy helicity index values across this region, with energy helicity index values that could potentially get upwards of 2 to 3 to potentially 4 and maybe even 5, which is definitely going to be indicative of the potential for a few tornadoes across this region, as well as the potential for strong tornadoes as well. Taking a look at our significant tornado parameter, I really only look at this whenever you have the potential for significant tornadoes across this region, but it is a more advanced version of energy helicity index, and it is indicating the potential for significant tornadoes across this region with some pretty big significant tornado parameter values, upwards of 3, which again will definitely be indicative of the potential for strong tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our damaging wind gust risk for this region, again, we do have a 15% indicating the potential for some scattered damaging wind gusts. I think this is going to play out potentially more of like a 30% damaging wind gust risk, as we are seeing models that are indicating upwards of 50 to 40 miles per hour wind gusts across this region, but it is definitely going to be pretty widespread. As the night falls, we are going to see an overall more of a risk for some scattered damaging wind gusts, but we are currently seeing some pretty widespread and some pretty hefty damaging wind gusts across this region. Taking a look at our large hail parameter and how that's going to indicate the potential for hail across this region, again, with storms that are currently ongoing, we do have some large hail parameter values that are upwards of 12 and 8 that are indicating the potential for some large hail. And then as far as our SIG hail percentage, we can also look at that. That's also indicating the potential for some large hail. I'm not really too sure how to read this, but it is at bare minimum indicating the potential for hail across this region. So again, we could see the potential for some large hail across this region. And check out the socials for Project Gladiator. Enjoy the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please do weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong in this forecast, or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather, Weather Watcher, JaxonWX, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.